Okay. What is, sorry, I still don't see it.
Yeah, 6.3.
Oh, I see. So we've left it one. Somebody, it's this time.
I think so. I'm hoping so. Right. Thank you. Thank you all for your attendance. We have 2 workshop items today. One is the 10-year capital works projects, and the other is the 30-year infrastructure strategy. And I'd like to, as chair, make a comment. I have circulated some queries around that I would like staff to be able to answer. Maybe some of them might just have a figure that's missing or an incorrect date that has actually been attributed to some of my queries, but I'd still like clarification with regards to those issues. I also understand the financial situation of both the 10-year capital works program, which we have. We also have some financial reports that will come alongside those reports. So we'll start with the infrastructure strategy 2024/2054. Thank you. Thanks, Murray. And sorry.
So Catherine Hall.
Yep. Thank you, Catherine.
Awesome, thank you. So we have got a slide pack to run through today. It's sort of broken into 2 parts. The first is, as Deborah mentioned, infrastructure strategy 2024 to 54, and then we move on to the more detailed budgets for the 10-year plan, which is a separate individual presentations. Last week we went through this first part of the presentation of infrastructure strategy, and so race through that super quick. So I'm going to spend maybe 10 seconds per slide, and then we've got some nice new slides at the end to talk you through with a bit more detail. So the first slide is, it's a long-term plan. So it's infrastructure strategy, which we like to refer to as a long-term plan because it takes a 10-year vision and extends it out to a 30-year horizon. Document's called a strategy, but in fact it's really more of a plan, and I'll talk a wee bit more about that. So the purpose of the strategy is all very well documented in legislation. It is to provide that 30-year outlook, and that came about because councils were putting all their capital works in year 11 and sort of saying there's no problem, there's nothing to see here. But of course the 30-year infrastructure strategy now brings those deficiencies to light, but there's all the legislation that we have to meet, and that's what our plan does. The plan is also an ongoing document that gets reviewed every 3 years, and so every 3 years we look over that plan, we refine the budgets, and we also make sure that the plan is fit for purpose. So it's not a complete rewrite, but all the budgets are reviewed, refined, and I suppose additional things can be added or things subtracted. In terms of the infrastructure strategy, we are only legally required to cover 3 waters and the transportation assets. For Sauron, we include all 5 of our waters, so we've got the water races and land drainage as additional, but we also include community facilities and the resource recovery and waste activities. This is because they are strategic assets in nature, and it also aligns with our activity policy. I'll leave that there. We also talked about key challenges. So there's 4 main key challenges that the infrastructure strategy addresses. So I won't go through those. We went through those last week, but they align with our activity management plans, asset management strategy document that came through to you guys earlier last year. So we now, after that quick whip through, as I promised, we now move on to the new slides, and this is all about the revised approach to the infrastructure strategy this time around. So we're trying to show the differences between what the last infrastructure strategy was to what we've done now. And so we're going to tag team here so you get a bit of alternative voices just to mix things up a wee bit.
Thank you, Murray. As Murray said, we've taken a bit of a fresh approach to the infrastructure strategy this time round. So while the projects and the direction are still consistent with the 2021 infrastructure strategy, the document has a different look and feel. So we started by going back to what is the legislative requirement, what does industry best practice look like, and shaping up a document in line with that. This has really allowed a reduction in the length of the document. So hopefully it's an easier read for yourselves and for your community. We've also looked at aligning more across the activities. So Murray identified those activities that go into your infrastructure strategy. Previous versions have looked at those in isolation, so assessed what are the drivers, what are the challenges, what are you doing in each of these activities standing alone. We've looked to take more of a cross-council approach to this, and that also allows us to identify where we have those interdependencies between your assets and activities. So it's taking more of a whole of council approach to your infrastructure.
Perfect. Thank you, Catherine. So on this and the next two slides, we go through the document and identify the main differences. So with this table on the screen, and this wasn't including your pack, we've done this between Friday and today, just to provide a bit more, I suppose, structure to our conversation. The first two columns split out what was in the introduction for 2021 infrastructure strategy, where the second column talks about what's in this year's infrastructure strategy. And you can see they're quite similar, but there's also some differences. So as an example, the infrastructure achievements, which was included in the last year's last time strategy, we've moved through to a different section. So if I just jump through to the next one, it's now incorporated as part of our infrastructure. You can see that on the second column there. So as we go through these slides, we're probably going to focus on the third column, which is the discussion points, talking about the change to approach and the areas of focus. But just so you know, the other more detailed information is on the left-hand side, and we can send these to councillors after this meeting. So in terms of discussion points, we've got the change to approach.
Thank you, Murray. Now, I apologise in advance. You're going to get a bit of repetition for me as we work through each of these sections, because, as I said before, the overarching change to approach is really around reduction of length, removal of repetition, and moving from including all of the detail in the infrastructure strategy to referencing detail in other documents such as your asset management plans or activity management plans or long-term plan where that's appropriate. In particular for the introduction section, we've also looked to use graphic summaries where appropriate. So as I elevating information from the supporting documents up into summaries, whether those be tables or graphic summaries as we work through.
Cool. So the area of focus for the introduction section of the infrastructure strategy is to set the strategic context. It's all about district planning, mana whenua, and the regional and national context for that. So that's the purpose of that introduction. So I suppose looking for direction from the front, but is there any comments on the introduction section of the infrastructure strategy that people like to bring at this point? Or we can just go through the whole document and have questions at the end. What would you like, Deborah?
So to give me an idea, which page should I be looking at on the document with regards to your infrastructure strategy summary? Because I'll go back to the beginning.
So in terms of infrastructure strategy, this is from page 2 to page 8. In terms of the agenda, I think we're 2 pages out, so it would be page 4 to page 10.
So we're just looking from, hang on, because I've got a copy here that
if you like, we'll rattle through the whole lot. I think might be best, and then we can take comments on the whole document. Is that?
So we're on page 8.
Madam Chair.
On diligent, sorry, page 8 of 155 and diligent. Just so everyone's on the same page. Otherwise, it'll be page 6 in the 2024/2054.
But I think we'll, if you're happy, Deborah, we'll just rattle through the whole lot, then we'll come back for questions at the end. That might make it easier instead of having to refer back to different sections.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification? I'm steering at Selwyn 2031. Is that the starting point with the strategic content of the document, of the graphs?
24.
Should that be 31 or should that be 30? Should that be another date?
It's page 8. Mary.
Page 8 on diligent, or page 6 in your strategy?
It's
There's two numbers out because the strategy has its own numbering system and it's been put into a corporate system which has content pages and things like that. So just 2 pages out. Yep.
It's 2 pages. Okay.
Yep.
Madam Chair.
Sorry, Shane.
Tēnā rā tātou, I had some comment on the introduction. Well done. And it definitely shows the relationship and the strength of our team Pou Ahurea with the inclusion of a number of, our strategy, Te Rautaki Ti Kakarua, the direction and efficiencies, but giving effect or more enhancement to the mana of Te Tiriti can only ever always be a good thing. So well done, and also well done to our Pou, Rawe, i ngā mātauranga, i ngā kaupapa o this document. Rawe.
Hi, thanks. Just having a quick flick through. I guess Sharon's touched on this in the past, but have we maintenance policy that's been followed prior to this? So your AMPs mentioned on page 8, talking about providing that to the community. Has that been provided to the community in the past by council on a regular basis?
So your council has got a robust renewal program going out over.
Oh, yeah, they are. Sorry.
And we would just consult with the communities in that area. So when we're coming to do renewals of rural pipelines, then we're talking to those farmers directly. If it's in townships, then it's notifying those ratepayers around there. We can provide more detail if that was required by the ratepayers about what's coming up in their area. But at this stage, it's more focused on those who are directly affected. Awesome. Okay, so the next section is our district, which is sort of a short and sweet one. So it's starting on the infrastructure page 9, which would be 11 in the diligent agenda, through to page 12 in that same agenda.
Thank you, Mary. Again, this is around reduction in length, so significant reduction there and inclusion of graphic summary. Councillor Sophie, I note that you've provided feedback already, so we'll be working through that, so thank you for those.
Yeah, and I suppose the area of focus for us in this section is about a maturing relationship with mana whenua into the infrastructure planning going forward, and also growth remains a significant driver for our projects and work programs. So any questions or comments on our district?
So I'm looking at page 10. Just a question. So we've referenced the National Infrastructure Strategy. Has the current government made any reference to that? I'm just worried about the number of different infrastructure things that they've talked about and the process of what they've been doing recently, and whether they've actually specifically spoken to that. It's just a question.
Yeah, I mean, the documents that are referenced in those sections are still stand, particularly on page 8 or 10 of the agenda, but there's only one thing that's certain in life, and that is change, and we are in a state of change at the moment. So things could change, and we just have to take the document as it sits today and reference it as it is.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, kia ora tātou. Page 13. Are we in infrastructure? Is it? Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'll wait.
No, no.
Yeah, no, I thought you had a question. Okay. No further questions up to page 13. So we're up to page 14, our infrastructure.
Whammo.
Awesome, thank you. And this is a lot more of a chunky section. And we're sort of broken into the slide into two parts. So our core infrastructure and then also the planning for our future type section. So we'll just run through each half again. So in terms of change of approach,
Again,
broken record.
yes, very much a broken record. I feel like I could have just submitted a tape. Reduction in length, we've used summaries and tables and graphics to summarize that. Really, the focus in this first half has been a high-level summary referencing other sections or AMPs. So the likes of the descriptions of your infrastructure assets, those belong in your asset management plans. The detailed information around the data you know about those assets, the condition of those assets, you'll see that in your activity management plans or asset management plans. The infrastructure strategy has tried to take a high-level summary and grade those. And then the other thing to note is, as Murray said earlier, there are sections, as you'll see, between the 2021 and 2024 infrastructure strategies we've moved around, and in particular assumptions has now moved into the risk section that we'll talk to later on.
Okay.
So the key area of focus is just the quality of data that we have. So majority of our assets are in that medium to high asset data quality, and then we also have some condition assessment information in that section as well, with most of our assets being around the moderate to very good condition category. And Sophie helpfully pointed out that those numbers don't always add up to 100%, and that's because some assets don't have a condition or a data quality attribute to those. So we'll add another column there just saying, you know, and sort of assets without those conditions or known, and then we can put the percentages there, which is good. The section talks about life cycle management. The growth is continuing to drive new assets, but we're also moving to a period where we are establishing some older assets, and they're going to need to be renewed. So with the new, over time becomes the old, and so this strategy looks at how we come to renew those assets going forward. So moving on to the plan for the future section of that, the change to approach.
Again, this really has been focused around the high-level summary, and where those summaries are offered, we have attempted to call out key points or issues and provide that reference, particularly the AMPs, the relevant documentation supporting the infrastructure strategy in this section.
What
So
section?
in terms,
Sorry.
so we're
I'm just
looking at the our infrastructure part of the activity part of the
Page.
Okay, so we are
Page-
on page 12 or 14 in diligent,
14.
all the way through to page 52 or 54 in diligent.
Thank
So
you.
this is a big section. That's why we broke it into those two halves to give the explanation of the changes. But is a big chunk of the document. So our area of focus here is obviously we continue to for growth is driving additional demand for services. Urbanisation is driving desire for increased level of services. So we've identified those as some areas of focus in the infrastructure strategy. In terms of renewal profiles, I touched on that earlier, but there's an increasing transportation bow wave that's starting to develop for renewals. Before, as I said, with new assets over time, they become old assets, and transportation assets are some of the first ones to show that ageing with a shorter design life of those. Most significant impact of climate change that's been identified is extreme rainfall, and that has an impact across all infrastructure. There's also a future impact of sea level rise, and that's particularly around Upper Sound huts that affect, and Rakai huts, and generally around the wastewater asset. There's also a changing assumption on water delivery. Obviously, there's some legislative changes with that, with a change in government, and the document will be updated to cover those changes. So with that overview, we'll now head over to the councillors. And again, it is a big section, so we'll take questions on that now.
Okay. Right, I've got Sam.
Thanks. Yeah. Couple of things. One is it can be easy to have an overinflated view of ourselves compared to how others might see us. And someone just recently reflected back to me about how councils might see, and this was a national conversation, their relationship with local iwi, and think, yeah, we're a 7 or an 8, doing quite well, and then you ask the other side of the relationship how well that's going, and it's a 3 or a 4. And it's not until you sort of ask those questions and find out with some real stuff where we are. So I'm just wondering about the data that we've got here and how peer-reviewed the data is. This isn't just our own assessment of where we're at. This is benchmarked nationally against other councils and the expectation of where we sit. Like, we can rely on the asset condition stuff that's in here. And then secondly, I was looking for like a specific target for us, and I was thinking about roading, just because it's on the front of my mind, about like reseals, and we have not done as much resealing as we need to keep our roads in the condition that our community expects. And this has been, I mean, ever since I've been on council, that's been one of the things. How many kilometres of road do we need to reseal every year to keep our roads in X condition? And so I guess my question is, do we have an age profile of our roads, or is there a particular target that we want to see so that we know that we're either meeting or not meeting that level? Is that at the front end of this document, or is that in the transportation piece? And I guess the same could be said of water and pipes and wherever it is. Are there some particular targets, or is it just this year we're going to look at a piece of pipe and see if it needs replacing, and if it does, we'll do it? Or if we think it will over the next 10 years, we'll do it? Or is there actually some data-driven targets that as governors we can go, okay, we can actually see the age of our roads is increasing. We're not putting enough money into this. We know that that's going to cause us a problem in 5 or 16 years' time. Yeah, where does that fit in this strategy?
Yes, that's a big question. So, supposed to answer it, there's a huge amount of data that goes into our renewal profile development. So it's quite a complex model. I'm trying to work out how much to go into detail, but for water supplies, we look at all sorts of things like obviously material and class, the age, those general things, but we also have records of faults, leaks and repairs, which then can accelerate or delay renewals, pressure ratings, our hydraulic models can feed into that about the operating pressure and things like that. Same for transportation, we have the rapid assessments of the vehicles going over, measuring roughness and degrading and all sorts of things. So we could probably come back and do a whole presentation on that at another stage, not part of the LTP, but as part of the infrastructure strategy for information to say, how do we generate our renewal profiles and how do they work? In terms of our data quality, activity management plans are peer reviewed. Valuation process is all done independently for water and transportation. So there's a lot of independent type assessments that go on as part of those processes. So confident, yes.
Cool.
Yep.
And will this strategy provide us with some key metrics that we're going to measure against, and you'll continue to report against to this committee or to council or whatever it is, so that we can see that we're meeting the targets that we originally set in the strategy?
Yeah, so we definitely have transportation in terms of resales, and looking at UA, we can perhaps cover that when we come to the 10-year infrastructure budget, so we'll come back to that, but there's definitely is targets that we aim to achieve.
Okay, thank you.
Sam, can I just ask a point of clarification? With regards to those targets, are you referencing our infrastructure achievements and trying to tie it back to that on page 24?
No, I just wasn't sure whether it was just sit at the front end of the document around what our infrastructure is, or whether it's going to be, as Murray said, might be covered later in the transportation piece. But I just think the strategy should enable us to know and have some measurements against it. We'll flow out from it. Otherwise, we're going to continue to meet and not know whether staff are measuring themselves against the strategy that we've set in the first instance. So.
Good point. Next, Nicole.
Thank you. So I've just got a few things I want to work through. I do actually have some just normal corrections, spelling and stuff that I'm quite happy to feed through.
Send those to us separately. We'll cover those off.
I won't go through them now. I mean, this is a huge document. You guys have done really, really well, and it's inevitable with anything like that these things come up. So on page 12 of diligent, and we talk about Greater Christchurch and from Rolleston in the south to Rangiora in the north. I just question whether that should actually be Lincoln, which is, if you look at the maps, actually a bit further south. 12 of diligent.
Page 12 of diligent.
So it's in the third paragraph. So
We can have a look at that offline, Nicole, if you're happy with it, or does that impact on your next question?
no, it
that's fine.
doesn't.
Yep, we'll
It's
correct
just-
that. Thank you.
It doesn't at all. So page 18 of diligent. So we've got, in the first column, we've got different metrics of Ks of roads, walking and cycling, footpaths, and kilometres of cycleways. I just question whether those are actually kilometres of cycleways or they're kilometres of shared paths, because there is a big difference between those.
Cool. No, fair call. We'll
Because I would say we probably
confirm
only
and
got
update.
about 1K, if that, of dedicated cycle green things. Yeah, and this, I'm sorry, I'm being a bit pedantic, but this is actually a big bugbear of mine, is that, you know, we're just putting in shared paths, and there are issues with shared paths with other users, walkers and such like, having bikes competing.
So just to clarify then, is there a preference that we report on cycleways as the exact thing, or would you rather we report on shared paths?
Well, it's up to you guys on, I just want it to, what's presented to actually reflect what we have out there. Yeah.
I understand. Thank you.
And whether we say they're shared paths or what, yeah. Because at the moment, I don't feel that that's reflective of it, because we certainly don't have 32 Ks of cycleways from the impression, from what I would define as being cycleways. And I would say Sophie would be in agreement with that. Community facilities, we talk about include cemeteries, community centres, halls. I just wonder whether we should add libraries in there as well. I couldn't see that written.
It's on page 20.
Sorry, 19 of.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
How far, what is the end of the section? What page number did you say?
So we're going to page 52 or 54 in diligent?
19, I've got
Okay.
91.
I've just made a note for page 35. The third point written on the top of the page, I'm really pleased to see this. Looking at what resilience, emissions reduction or sustainability components can be added, balancing the cost of action now versus later. It is great to see something like that written in this document from my perspective, because this has been another bugbear of mine. And I think that's, there's more I could say, but I think it's probably better I take offline with you guys.
No, thank you for that, Councillor. So we've noted those changes down, so we'll make those. Thank you.
Right, Shane.
Quickly from me, thank you, Madam Chair. The bilingual strategy, one would hope also that it flows through to contractors as well, potentially. Not in a must-do way, but certainly, you know, in the spirit of well-being for the district. I think that's a good start. Infrastructure contribution, page 22 to Waikirikiri Selwyn Community Outcomes. That's a great table in there, and I really appreciate that being in there. Interesting enough, page 23, a district which values its culture and heritage. And we've just finished discussing that earlier on, but something given consideration around that, I guess, is what is in this document, wāhi taonga, and places of tribal significance as well. So some food for thought there. 28, page 28, spelling mistake there. It shows how diligently I read the whole agenda. Te whata ora should be whatu ora. Tēnā koe. Transportation, I think on page 42, transportation up the top there, renewal profile. Are you able to talk me through where it says the page 42 of diligent renewal profile and transportation? Just sort of thinking around Sam's question there. That cost relates to, or the escalating cost, is that maintenance and repairs?
Yeah, so these are the renewal profiles. So it's the resurfacing, rebuilding the roads. So as mentioned before, there is a large increase as we hit that bow wave coming through. So that wasn't quite so evident in previous infrastructure strategies.
Yes.
But this one here, we're showing actually there is a looming financial cost coming this way.
Which will be obviously reflected in the LTP.
Yeah, so we don't hit quite so bad. So those are those are 5-year time slots. So the first two bars are in the long-term plan, and that's why the infrastructure strategy is so important. Because as you go out, we're saying well, actually there's some hurt coming.
Yes, yeah, and that's why I appreciate this as a strategy document, and we can be referenced to the physical costs or the financial costs through the other places that you've mentioned. Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Elizabeth.
Page 28, the resource recovery and waste. So this is an infrastructure strategy for 30 years, correct? So we've got completed, underway and underway. So we're just about finished with all those projects. If this is for 30 years going forward, do we not want to be ahead of the game in addressing some areas that we haven't tackled? I mean, these things are all great, but there's a whole lot of areas that need to be addressed so that we are not a country who's shipping our waste and our problems overseas or burying them in pits in the ground. I think we could be looking forward to some additional projects in this.
Yes, I think this section is looking at what we have achieved in the previous plan, and then as we move forward into major projects and decisions, which is on page 63 of diligence, that's when we start looking in the more forward direction. So we'll come back to those at that point.
I have a query, please, on page 52. And it's consenting and compliance. And I note that this year until 2030, between 2024 and 2030, we actually have, am I reading this right, 15 wastewater consents in the next 10 years that the consents will expire. So I'm assuming that if they expire, any upgrades or improvements that need to be, I presume that where would I find? I'd find those budgeted in the 5 years key projects plan, would I?
Yeah,
For
so
those
they're
current
all
years?
in the in terms of our long-term plan. So we include resource consents as part of our valuation and renewal strategies, and so often it's 5 years or up to 5 years ahead of that expiry. The budget becomes available for us to apply for the necessary resource consents to carry that activity on. So this is just identifying where those consents come up for renewal, and then there's budgets and the appropriate time slots to make sure that that is achieved.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to add, in addition to that, you will then see in the section covering the major decisions going forward, which we'll come to on the next slide, we have identified that some of those consent renewals into the future may require additional work and a higher standard to be met. But where those are unknown, there's not the detail in those budgets. But as Murray says, the detail for those first 10 years is certainly in the LTP budgets.
Okay, thank you. All right, no further questions.
Okay, so onto the last slide for the infrastructure strategy. Yes, that is correct. So we're now onto the section, our sustainable and resilient future. So I'm just looking across to Catherine, what page numbers and diligent we're looking for on those. So that starts at page 55 and goes through to page 83. So page 55 to 83. And the main discussion points, the change in approach, Catherine.
Thank you. Again, sort of significant reduction in length and detail in the AMPs where necessary. And as I identified earlier, looking at integrating across the asset holdings. So rather than going through your water assets versus your wastewater versus your transportation assets, we're looking at those across council's asset holdings.
So the key areas of focus in this section looks at priorities identified. They align with the asset management policy adopted by council in August 2023. The major decisions are the big ticket items or future decisions that council will need to make through future LTPs. And we also cover in the section the abilities of our capital programs, which we talk about the organisational change, dedicated capital delivery team, governance changes, project management changes, improvement phasing and staging of projects, which includes planning, consenting, tendering and construction. So those are the main sort of changes in direction of that section. So pass back to you, Deborah, for any comments.
Okay. Grant?
Just a query around the significant reduction in detail, I guess. If you have that level of detail when it relates to the asset management, where's it held? Is it held as appendices or is it held down the asset management plan? You know, if you're making it more high level, where are we seeing that level of detail being held within our organisation?
Yep, no, that's a good question, Grant. So we are moving this to a more high level document, and that detail is all covered in the asset activity management plans. So that's definitely not lost, correct?
Oh, sorry. I have a question on 65. And I guess it's just an example of the fact that we're looking at a centralised water supply under our One Water strategy. And I note that there's a cost of $400 million allocated, not in this 10-year budget, but extending it out to the following 10-year budget. I'm just a little bit lost as to are we implementing some of these projects in our 10-year budget with regards to our One Water strategy? Because I've seen some costs in the 5 Waters key strategy for 10 years that I would say would fit under the water strategy, the One Water strategy, right? Like connecting townships up to manage nitrate, and there's quite a considerable cost factor involved in those, and they're not all DC funded. And I just wondered if we're in this document pushing them out, why are we still including them in our 5 Water 10-year budget? It just doesn't seem to correlate. There just seems to be a gap.
Yeah, so in terms of the centralised treatment in the LTP, the first 10 years, we just have investigation work and planning and design. There's no construction works planned in that first 10 years. We'll come to the 10-year budgets in the next process. I'll get Joe to talk more about the spring STIN and joining up, but there's greater benefits than just low nitrates. There's a number of operational efficiencies, compliance matters that we can talk to at that point.
Okay. Grant.
I'm on page 66 in diligent. Potable water losses, it just seems 15,000 a year for leak detection seems very low. I'm just sort of contextually, you're thinking about Wellington's woes, and I suppose it's a good opportunity to ask that question. Are there any infrastructure issues that the asset management team see either now or in the future, which us as governors might be saying they had their head in the sand, they didn't look at the infrastructure, and we were telling them, this is your opportunity, Murray, clean slate.
Thank you for that opportunity. I suppose I could say over the last 3 years, this particular 2021 LTP, we've been focusing on all the problem areas of our water supply, particularly in the rural supplies. We've had lots of breaks, leaks and faults, so we've did a concerted effort into this. I might need Jo to talk more about this when she comes to her section about the leak detection, but this is more of I assume it's more of a technical investigation about where leaks are as opposed to dedicated fixing leaks that we have now.
I guess the media comment, particularly around Kapiti, is the implementation of water metering has driven a huge reduction in water leaks, and I was hoping you might say that's been the outcome of our water metering program.
That's the question. So then, yes, 100%, and it'll be great to actually show some more information on that. There's been a huge reduction.
Promise you out in a minute.
Yeah, I'm getting excited now. There's been a huge reduction in water use, and cause a lot of leaks are on the private side of the meter, and there's no better way to focus one's mind to fix those leaks if you're paying for the water that you're not using. So yes, there's been a great reduction in water use.
Nicole.
On page 70 on diligent, the last point on that table, it's got some LED lamps can cause negative effects on night glow and on birds and flying invertebrates. So I gather from that means that we're going to take those sorts of things in consideration when we choose the lamps, or what is the, or is, I just am a bit unsure about why we've got that statement in there. I don't know, I'll just leave it for you guys to
let us ponder that and come back to you if that's okay. I think it's probably very much location specific, but we'll come back for more detail.
Because it might just, if it's staying, it just might need a bit more context. On page 75, so under the greenhouse gas emissions at the Pines wastewater treatment plant, got one of the assumptions is that biosolids can be used locally, reducing transport emissions. Have we looked at that?
Yeah, we have. So again, Jo can probably talk more knowledgeably about this, but in terms of Pines 120, which is sort of ending up being Pines 130, there's a couple of ways of using the sludge. So one is on our land, and we're going through trials and getting the last bit of consenting sorted for that, so we can dispose of land locally instead of taking it through to rehabilitation sites across on the west coast. And the other way would be through a boiler. So we're looking at establishing a boiler to generate heat for our greenhouses, not greenhouse gases, our greenhouses, so we can keep those heated through the winter, so we can actually reuse that sludge to generate energy to then power the greenhouses, keep them warm, to dry the sludge. So it's sort of a continuous efficiency type thing. But there's a lot of things in the Pines upgrade, recuperating gas, so we can use that to run generators as well. So there's a whole lot of sustainability processes that we're implementing in this long-term plan and 30-year infrastructure strategy.
Okay. Yeah, no, discuss later. Thank you.
Oh, I keep losing it. Sorry, Elizabeth.
Okay, if I go to page 103, cemeteries. Down the bottom, it talks about the climate change impacts, investigate the groundwater level increase on the cemetery operations and compliance. But we obviously, not allowed in that presentation yet. That's why I asked.
Oh. Right. Sorry, my computer seems to have frozen.
I think we're on to the last section now, Deborah, which is finances. So in terms of the change to approach.
Thank you, Mary. So again, we've, in terms of setting the context for the financials, so not the detail of your financials or your graphs, but setting the context, it's that removal of repetition. We are reporting on asset summary basis. We have also moved to 5-year grouping. So previous infrastructure strategies, because the legislation requires annual budgets for years 1 to 10, and then a minimum of 5-year groupings of budgets thereafter for years 11 to 30. We've always had these graphs that have a very odd scale. So you have your annual budgets in years 1 to 10, and then 5-year blocks. So for the tables, we still have that detail to meet legislative requirement, but the graphs are now moved into 5-year groups. So you'll see the 10-year budgets are in those 2 5-year groups. It allows that scale to be shown across the 30-year period. And in the same way, we've done that with vested assets, which is an addition to this infrastructure strategy compared to previous ones. So attempting to forecast the vested assets coming through, because as Murray's identified, that is a significant driver going forward for your maintenance and operations budgets and your future renewals.
Cool. So I think we'll leave that there and have questions on the
Jane?
financials.
Sorry.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, this is the level of, thank you for this in the report. That's based on today's current costs, prices.
Today's
And does it
dollars.
take into account inflation to what it is today, obviously? Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
correct, yes.
Yeah.
Sophie, sorry.
Yeah, so the graph on page 84 of the strategy, 86 of diligent, is this within where we're looking at the moment? Yep, cool. I'm just wondering, I think I did email it through, but the orange line that says average costs per year was around, like, the question is if that costs to a household or costs in interest, or what costs?
Thank you. So this comes back to, as I said before, because we've moved to grouping in 5-year groups for the entire 30-year graph, this line is an attempt to demonstrate the average annual. So instead of having your annual for your first 10 years, total cost to council. So in this case, we're looking at total operational expenditure. A few pages later is the total capital expenditure. This is the average amount you would expect to see in one of those years within that 5-year block. Because otherwise those total bars are quite large numbers.
Sam.
Yeah, I like seeing this because it's actually helping us have a conversation that is above where we normally are at, which tends to be a project by project related conversation as opposed to an asset class or an overall picture of where council's at, which is great. So my question is really coming back to what I asked before. What sort of reporting, because obviously the reporting actually, and this is probably maybe a question for Sharon, reporting is actually what drives lots of our discussions. What level of reporting against the strategy is going to be brought back to us to enable that sort of all of asset class discussion and long-term governance conversation, maybe as well as some project stuff, because some projects are very important and are of a large scale, but that transition into this level of thinking a bit more regularly around the council table?
Yep, absolutely. And some of the conversations I've shared with councillors is the desire to improve our performance reporting. And so depending on what we do with reviewing our governance structure, it's about utilising the finance and performance, or if it's going to be this committee, that's the most appropriate committee, to make sure that we have regular quarterly performance reports that come through that are a direct measure against our infrastructure strategy. So we're currently not there yet as an organisation, but that is our aspiration to transition towards that over the coming 12 months.
Thank you.
Elizabeth?
If I may, on page 86, we get to the last graph, basically. It's quite a significant increase in the resource recovery and waste. I'm just wondering why that peaks from in the 2024 bracket and goes up to a phenomenal increase in that time. Is that because there's an expectation on legislative changes, or what are we doing that's going to make for that massive change? The other question, I guess, is just to confirm. So we're saying that the average cost in this bracket, the 2024 first graph, looking at around the 100 million. So we're looking at it being triple. So in 20 years, the cost to us is going to be 3 times greater. Is that correct?
Yeah, so these graphs and maybe I'm correcting slightly what I said before, but these are subject to inflation and also growth. So that's why you're seeing those large increases.
I've got a question, and it's on page 85, 155 of Diligent, and it's the operational expenditure. And I'm only looking at the first line, which is 24-25. And I see that we have, and this is millions, by the way, we have a total of $97 million just in our operational expenditure. And if I recall, in our last year's annual report, we collected 85 million in rates. I think we collected 20 million in DCs. And this is just the operational expenditure. And what I'm talking about is 85 million, 20 million. And then I'm just trying to compare what we've put in our annual report as our revenue and measured it against the operational expenditure alone. That's without renewals, that's without other projects. And I'm just wondering, are these figures correct, or am I just not reading it right?
Yeah, so I don't have the annual report on me, but I'm happy to provide that comparison table and send it to you after the meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Awesome. Well, I gotta say thank you very much. It's a big document and a massive read. So thank you for your attention and details. And for those who have sent questions through as well, we'll come back to you directly about those.
Thank you. Right, the next one is 93, Community Facilities Key Projects 10-year.
Awesome. So I've probably been a wee bit naughty. We're going to just change the agenda around slightly. So we'll go transportation now, if that's okay. Deborah, is it?
Oh, okay.
Yep.
119 on Diligent.
So we'll run you through the transportation slides. I have UA, our transportation asset manager, here to help me through that.
Okay.
In fact, I'm just going to hand it over to him shortly. There's some new slides in here to try and make the explanation a bit more clear and structured. So without further ado, I'll hand to UA.
Kia ora and good afternoon. I'm happy to give you firstly, a brief overview of our transportation activities and funding, then get into the details of the staging of our CAPEX projects over the next 10 years. So in terms of the transportation program in the next 3 years, so we have a continuous program, or the maintenance operations renewal program, that's approximately $27 million per year. On the other hand, we also have improvements. Those would be approximately $36 million per year. And on the side, there is major emergency works. We are estimating a $3 million per year in expenditure, and the council needs to budget about $1 million in council's co-share, because the rest would be subsidized by NZTA, but we could not make a budget for it. Those are to be requested once things happen. So in terms of the NZTA subsidies, so our financial funding assistance rate is 51%. So the whole continuous program is eligible, and about half of the improvements programs are eligible as well. So together we are looking at about $22 million per year in NZTA subsidy. In terms of the SDC's resource, we have updated the estimate for DC. The DC revenue is roughly 10% of the CAPEX in transportation. So you're looking at $4 million per year there in terms of the revenue. So 64 in terms of expenditure per year, and 26 in terms of the revenue per year. That's the big picture.
So I think we're going to go through all the slides and we'll take questions at the end.
Okay.
So this slide shows you the breakdown of the subsidized MOR program, subsidized improvements and unsubsidized improvements. Overall, we have a steady increase in the MOR program because our asset is aging, and also over the years, we are having more and more assets to maintain. So we're seeing a steady increasing trend. But on the other hand, in terms of the capital expenditure improvements, we are budgeting at a $37 million per year on average over the next 10 years. And the last 7 years is relatively steady. And the first 3 years, we backloaded a little bit, so to ramp up our delivery capabilities. So in terms of the prioritization of the transportation program, first of all, there is the business as usual program that we need to guarantee, that is the maintenance operations renewal, and also there are a few minor continuous projects that just keeps us running the day-to-day business. Then the priority 1 would be those projects and the packages for which NZTA subsidies are requested. The priority 2 would be those non-subsidized projects where there is a DC contribution. And lastly, are the projects funded by the council alone. So in terms of the business as usual minor CAPEX, here is a breakdown and a noticeable item in your information pack. Over the there's a $3 million item. In this update, we break it down into 3 items, $1 million each. The first item is the road renewals backlog funding. So this is because in the past 8 years, what council did or had to do was to essentially rob our renewal money to fund the maintenance. So over the last 8 years, we essentially under-delivered $10 million in resales. So this is for the next LTP 10 years, we put in $1 million per year just to catch up for those. Secondly, the emergency work council share, that's what I just mentioned, to cover our co-share when emergency works happens. And lastly, the transport discretionary activities. This is just a continuation of what was budgeted at the council previously, $1 million extra every year to deal with all kinds of contingencies and also to be used as our council's co-share when there is additional NZTA funding opportunities. This slide is about the major transportation CAPEX projects. So over the 10 years, we have identified clearly $269 million in total expenditure, and there are about $100 million beyond 34. Those are just the projects that we are able to identify at this stage. They would be front-loaded a little bit. So those projects would fall broadly into those major categories: roads upgrade, intersection upgrades, public transportation, walking and cycling, etc. And in the information pack, you would have the full 10-year and beyond, the package list, a breakdown of detailed packages, and also the information on each individual projects in this whole thing. So the main packages that are contained in this 10-year program are the public transportation infrastructure, the Road to Zero, safety improvements, the NZ Up coordinated Rolleston access program, and lastly, the Lincoln Town Center. The first three are subsidized programs. So we are expecting 51% subsidy from NZTA. The last one, except one intersection, signalized intersection at Vernon Road, most of them are unsubsidized. In terms of project staging, for public transportation infrastructure, this slide you already seen in the LTP discussion. So we have roughly 3 projects, park and ride projects. They are staged over the 10 years, and we have asked the residents whether they want to fund the whole thing, regardless of whether Waka Kotahi co-funds it or not. So this is a big decision facing the residents. These slides are all the Road to Zero projects identified in our program. Of just a clarification on the name Road to Zero. Probably this won't be a name going forward because it is really a labor initiative. So, but anyway, it's a safety initiative. It's going to be folded into local road improvements under the safety category, and these programs have been moderated with our NZTA safety advisors. And the next package is Rolleston Access. Again, this name ends up. I'm not sure how far away it's going to continue. As also, it was a labor initiative. But it is the National also committed in their Transport for the Future program. Basically their transportation paper before the election, that they are committed to continue to fund this program. And the program itself is for state highway for NZTA. So we got the flyover and the roundabout, but then we need to have, the council needs to have a supporting package for that. So those programs have been developed together with NZTA, and likely will also get priority in NZTA funding when NZUP program gets under the way. So, sorry, not getting the way. So in this picture, you will see on the surrounding areas, those are the projects that are listed here, subsidized program, close to $20 million. In the inside, those are really our local programs, Rolleston improvements, those would be non-subsidized. The last one is the Lincoln Town Center project, a big project, and we're going to tackle it in 4 stages. Firstly, starting new library, that's stage 1, with a lot of money to spend over there, and we plan to work westwards. That's stage 2. And then stage 3 is the intersection near the university, and then stage 4 going back to the east end.
Well done, Yue, thank you. So we'll hand back to you, Deborah, to facilitate any questions that may arise.
Any questions on these projects? Okay, Elizabeth.
My first question was on the page 123, the Road to Zero project still on the path to subsidise and going ahead. You did talk about some on another page. So is that the page 123 as well? To 123 on here. Sorry. So you've got intersection upgrades, for example.
This is the slide that's on the screen now.
Oh no, it's transportation capex page for me. That's it. Yeah, so just asking, are those the same, those projects are all likely to, and your main packages are all likely to go ahead, the ones that are subsidised? They're definite that they're still going to go ahead with the new government?
Projects aren't a definite yet. So we find out sort of October this year
Okay, cool.
about the confirmation of projects and funding. So until then, it's not definite, but we've got a high indication that these ones will be going through.
Okay, that's cool. On page 125, so that's 2 ahead. So that was one you just had up before. So the first project you've got there is the Goulds and Ellesmere Road intersection safety upgrade. Just wondered if you had any visuals to give an indication of what a safety upgrade at the intersection will entail.
Thank you for the question. First of all, just going back to your previous question regarding funding approval. So NZTA does our funding approval on 3-year rolling basis. So we would have more certainty, more confidence with the first 3 years projects. Now going back to this one, as you can see, there are many different types of safety improvements. You can roughly determine by the size of the projects or the money. If you're doing a roundabout, you're looking at $5 to $10 million. And if you are looking at the first item, safety in the section safety upgrade, 150K, that's probably a very minor item with maybe raised crossing or whatever. And then that RIAWS, you see a lot over there. Those are rural intersection advanced warning system. So those are essentially when a vehicle approaches from the side road, there is a warning flashing on the main road telling people, yes, please be careful. So there are different kinds.
Yeah, so we're happy to respond outside of this meeting too if you have particular questions of these projects. We may not have designs at this point, but we can definitely give you an indication of what those works would entail.
Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Workshops are fantastic. I really enjoy them. The backlog budget, wherever that was, it was only $1 million. Do you think that's enough? And where do we find the information behind what's the backlog? There's a fair bit out there. That's one question. There's a whole heap in this, so I don't know how we're going. But just the measurement on road renewals, the equation that we use, it kind of doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that people where they're not getting enough money in to maintain the roads, or yeah, basically that's really it. So I'm interested. We've got VKT, which is a bottom of the cliff type of thing. We know how much is going over it afterwards, but you know, I mean, are we using the correct equation or forecasting going forward for renewals, given such a bow wave?
Well, it's not enough, if I have to be honest, but given the council's financial situation, it's when we ask for money, we ask for the money that can be best spent to get the best bang for the buck. So that $10 million for resales is really the first line item we want to catch up. So because resales are the essentially they provide best bang for the buck in terms of the renewals and the maintenance. If we spend something in resales, we could save a lot in maintenance. So that's the first bit. And then in our infrastructure strategy, we actually identified AC renewals is going to be a big wave hitting us over the next 20 years. Over the next 20 years, we're probably looking at an average of $7 million per year. And say 20 years from now on, we get another wave because this existing set of renewed AC is going to get renewed again. So then at that time, we'll probably, for those 20 years, we're probably looking at $20 million per year. So yeah, just in AC renewals, not resales. So that's there. That a financial strategy needs to happen. And then in terms of other things, like say pavement renewals, clearly we are not doing enough, but we need to gradually ramp that up. And our decisions are based on a thorough examination of our data, including the age profile and the conditions.
Thank you, Wei. I appreciate your directness. I really do. Sorry, I had another question, just a supplementary to that, and ensuring that perhaps some of the backlog work is completed in a prioritised fashion, so that we're not going back over something that we've just done, a couple of years before. So ensuring priorities are coming out of this that are consistent. Thank you.
Sharon.
Yep, thank you. Look, I would like to congratulate and thank you. He's new to our team, and he's brought a very different lens, which has been absolutely fantastic. And we're really happy and confident with the direction and guidance that UA has been giving us around how we are doing our business going forward in terms of renewals and maintenance. UA is quite right. The $1 million per year, we gave a great deal of thought to that, about how to make that affordable and to do that catch up. And having that commitment, and forgive me if I articulate this incorrectly, because my technology savvy mind not, is around making sure that the funding for each programme is used out of each programme and not interchanged and offset, and that is our commitment going forward. So I think that that's really important to state that.
Grant?
The question I get asked most often, which I hope you might be able to help me, the ratepayers, is the seemingly very, very high cost of roundabouts for what you get. We used to be sort of rule of thumb of $1 million a kilometre to seal roads. And then you got $6 and $8 million for a roundabout, and they're building one at Horsell at the moment. And you look at it and go, wee bit of digging, and the value doesn't seem to be there. The equation versus what you pay versus what you get seems, for our ratepayers and to myself to a certain extent, seems to be out of whack. Is there any way of driving that price down, or can we justify that price to our ratepayers? Second question is, while I'm on there, is what's our post-oil solution for our roads? What happens when what happens after no bitumen available, or bitumen becomes too dear?
We might come back to you about the roundabout costing. So we do have costings recently for some roundabouts. There's a lot of cost with regards to land purchase is a big part of that. It's not fully, yeah. But I'll come back to you about that, I think, directly. In terms of the post-oil, that's you, right?
So yes, we are getting bitumen cost increase over the past 3 years. Our bitumen per ton actually doubled from 777 to 1570 per ton. So that's extra $1 million per year just to maintain the business as usual. So yes, I understand your concern, and this is in the long term. We don't see a major solution or substitute for bitumen. Actually, compared to cement, bitumen is a lot more environmentally friendly in terms of CO2 emissions. So it's bottom of the barrel. It's really, if you use all the things for gasoline, for diesel, at the end you are left with those bitumen, and I hope we can continue to use those.
So our rural ratepayers are ahead of the curve. They're actually the most environmentally friendly by having shingle roads. And our new subdivision should be shingle, perhaps metal.
Yes, back to shingle.
Back to metal.
We won't comment on that.
Okay.
If someone's going to lead the curve on being environmentally responsible.
Lydia.
Sorry, I'm still laughing about the back to shingle.
I was just wondering about in the transport capex and around Hoskins Road, and it, I guess being a priority towards the I zone, and I see that the widening isn't really finished until 2030. Should it be a bigger priority as it leads into our I zone for heavy transport?
The program further away in say 2030, those definitely could be revisited. We focus on the next 3 years, but then the 7 years afterwards is really as we develop more knowledge and also looking at how NZTA progresses, then we can definitely make that adjustment 3 years down the road.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. I have a couple of questions. Just on the Road to Zero projects and roundabouts, if we go to the next line, the next page, we're actually looking at $4 million for a set of traffic lights in Duns Crossing Road. So when I look at all the roundabouts at 5 million and 6 million, why aren't we putting in traffic lights and saving ourselves costs of land purchases and others? I just strategically going forward in the future, if it's cheaper to actually put in lights, why aren't we looking at putting in lights? That's one question, to save some money. And the other, sorry, on this Road to Zero, I noticed that some of the projects, like we've got the Springster, we've got the Springs Hampton roundabout, and we've got that in the year 25, 26, but it's actually being started now. So it's actually a project that's been brought forward. Just looking at the timing of your capital projects, that's all that on that particular list. So just trying to clarify, is that the order, or will they regularly change depending on when development happens, when we get the DCs in, which will hopefully also help pay for some of this budget?
So, sorry, let me answer your questions on Springs and Hamptons. So there are 5 roundabouts in the whole Purbeton package. We finished 2 roundabouts on, say, Marshes and the Springs, and also Shands and Blake's. So those are already done. And this year we are doing 2 on Shands at the intersections of Hamptons and the Trents. So those are to be delivered this year. And then the last one of that package is Springs and Hamptons. The work has not started. It's scheduled to start in 25, 26.
Oh, sorry, I must have misinterpreted all the road enclosures and time delays. So
No.
thinking that it had already started.
No.
Okay, no. But I'm quite serious about traffic lights versus roundabouts, to be honest. If it's more cost effective, why aren't we looking at that scenario?
Yes, I agree. We should, for each one of them, we should look carefully to determine what is the most suitable in terms of safety and also in terms of the cost. And safety-wise, there are evidence that roundabouts are safer in many situations. So in terms of the NZTA approval, they actually don't, when we have a roundabout, they don't ask us to go through a lot of hoops, and they would get into their project list in a fast track way. If it is a signalized intersection, we actually needs to put in raised crossings, etc., that would add up to the cost in order to go on a similar fast track route. So we should look at all those in terms of funding, money, and the performance.
Okay. And I guess my last question is, we've still got deliberations and submissions from an LTP process, a draft LTP process to come through. How critical is it that at a political level, to manage our rates, we start playing around with these figures and pushing them out, or saying that, you know, is this a nice to have is this a necessity?
Yeah, so we definitely don't want to be playing around with the priority order at this point in time. So it's important for the LTP process to come to completion, the deliberations to occur, and then we can look at doing that if that's what's required.
Okay. All right. Any further questions on roading? Thank you for your report. Now the next one is we're going to do community facilities on Five Waters.
Yeah, so we have jiggled things around a wee bit just to fit with staff times and when they have to leave and things
Okay.
like that. So as Five Waters, so thanks Yue and Joe Golden and Catherine for Five Waters.
Awesome, great. Kia ora koutou. So I'm just going to do a high-level overview of the Five Waters program. So basically, we've got 300 line items in our Five Waters program. So I won't be going into them in detail. And if you want to test my knowledge on one of those 300 line items, Catherine will hopefully help me with the spreadsheets. So basically, we've got 822 million total across the capital program for the 10 years, plus another 106 million for renewals. So we have shifted the first 3 years to make room for some of the carry forward. So we have done that exercise. Most of our program is driven by compliance and growth. So they're our key drivers, and the capital program is 54% targeted rate and 46% DC funded. So just a reminder, I guess we've mentioned this in previous workshops, that we have budgeted for 3 waters to be in for the full 10 years of the LTP. So I guess heading up our program and setting the direction is our One Water strategy. So included in the LTP is implementation of the strategy. So we've got 2.8 million over the 10 years as a single line item, but we also have lots of other things that we've included in our program that are sort of separate. So it does end up being a greater total than the 2.8. And these are things like waterway health monitoring, climate adaptation planning, reviewing of our engineering standards, and a review of the strategy itself and ongoing engagement. Thank you. So this is our drinking water quality program. So we've got 69.2 million over the 10 years. And this program is really driven around resilience and level of service upgrades for our water supplies. So it's things like source and treatment plant upgrades, storage and connecting schemes. And these projects are really required to improve our compliance under the drinking water quality standards and just increase the resilience of the schemes. So the key initiatives are treatment upgrades, which will improve our compliance against the water quality targets, so bacteria and protozoa. Source upgrades and connecting schemes, which is going to help us with our compliance with the chlorine residual. So higher quality source water means that we'll be able to keep the chlorine residual in the water more effectively. And connecting schemes and storage is reliability of supply. So we have in the Te Mata Arowaia standards, we've got unplanned interruptions greater than 8 hours have to be reported. So they all contribute towards meeting those requirements. This program is largely targeted rate funded, except for the investigations for the centralised treatment, which is the last line on the bottom of that slide. So just to give you an example, the Dalethorpe scheme, we're looking to connect that to Springfield to get access to higher quality source water, which will, as I said, help us maintain our chlorine residual. And we've got storage upgrades to improve the quality of the supply. So I'm not going to go through each of the line items. So up there are some examples of the things in this program. Okay, great. So next up, we've got meeting growth demands for our water supply program. So we've got 70 million over 10 years, which is predominantly DC funded. So obviously our growth has been based on the high growth scenario, and included in your pack were the water supply master plans, which have been developed by One Water, which is what this program has been based on. So again, sources, treatment, storage, network, a lot of the water supply program comes back to the same types of activities. So I can give you a couple of examples. So Lincoln, we've got the Verve Reservoir, which is going to give us 1,000 cubic meters of storage and 12 kilometers of pipe upgrades included in that program. And Rolleston is our most significant growth investment program in the water side of things, which is additional bores potentially in North Rolleston, maybe around Izone. We're still looking at the exact location for that. 3,000 cube of storage and significant network upgrades. So our wastewater level of service program, we've got 33 million over the 10 years, and this is largely around treatment and network upgrades. Targeted rate funded, and a couple of examples from this program are the Castle Hill. So we've got inlet screen, monitoring, filtering, and the subsurface irrigation disposal, which will allow us to discharge over the winter. Also included in this program is completion of the Ellesmere to Pines pipeline, including the Upper Selwyn huts. Great, thank you. So the wastewater meeting growth demands. So this program is 65.5 million over the 10 years and is predominantly growth funded. So the two key items in this program are Leaston. So Ellesmere, which includes Leaston and Southbridge. So for example, in Leaston, we are doing some upgrades to the existing gravity network to accommodate growth, and a network extension to a new pump station on Lake Road, capacity and health and safety improvements. And for the Selwyn Sewerage Scheme, which you've got master plans included in your pack with some detail plans on those. So for Prebbleton, for example, which is part of the Triple S scheme, so we've got Trent Springs, Birches, Trices Road, RESIC upgrades, pump station upgrades at Meadows, and a new terminal pump station and Rising Main. Great. So Pines growth. So Pines wastewater treatment plant to take us to Pines 120. So this is 82.4 million DC funded in years 1 to 8. So this is a program to increase our capacity at the Pines to service a population of 120,000. The current configuration will take us through to around 2027, 2028. And by 2033, we should be able to service a population equivalent of 72,000. So these upgrades also allow us to connect the townships of Leaston, Ellesmere, Darfield, Kirwee and Tytap, which is coming in 2028. So, so up on the slide are the component items that are included in the Pines upgrade. Thank you. And so we've got a number of initiatives in our surface water program in the LTP to address surface water quality, quantity and management. So one of the big ones for us is implementation of the land drainage catchment management plans, which is 8.7 million. So this is going to include construction of water quality facilities, so wetlands and sediment traps, creating in-stream habitat across the network, education, engagement and monitoring. We also have the remaining stages of the Leaston bypass, which are planned for construction as well as upgrades in Dawson and Southbridge. So in Southbridge, we have plans for a siphon upgrade and flood diversion. Obviously, the issues in Southbridge have been around quite a long time, and there have been a number of things floated in the past. And we also have Springfield flood bypass is actually planned for construction outside of the 10-year period, but we've got some design work planned for that. We also have some minor level of service items for water races down at 1.9 million, which includes minor things like gate upgrades, works to facilitate closure of council-initiated closures, such as the Upper Ellesmere scheme, mudfish protection. And the final slide is just an overview of our renewals program. So we've got, for Five Waters, we've got 106 million over the 10-year period, which is linear P&E, and our consent renewals are included in here as well. So our water linear renewals, obviously for the pipe network, contribute to us achieving our mandatory KPI and performance measures for water loss. So that's quite a key item to make sure that we continue on with. The peak in year 4 is actually made up of a few different items rather than one particularly big one. But for example, the Lincoln Town Centre renewals that are linked to the town centre upgrade are included in year 4 at around 3 million. We've also got some water race consent renewals, which are coming out at 200,000, all in year 4, and P&E and wastewater renewals. So that's sort of a bit of a background to why year 4 is looking quite how it is. So that was a quick fly overview. And happy to take any questions. And I'm hoping Murray's going to help bail me out with some of those.
It's not how it works. But no, thanks, Joe and Catherine. That's really, really helpful. And I think it's I like that last point is that is a big year, but we want to make sure we do those renewals with the other works. We don't want to be doing the town centre upgrade and then coming back a year later and digging the road up and do the renewals. So that's why we brought that those renewals forward. Deborah, back to you for questions.
Okay, any questions on the 5 water key projects? Grant.
Just starting off on the stormwater, Doylestown 6.5 million, is that correct? What does that relate to? It just
Yes.
seems like an inordinate amount of money to spend in Doylestown. Not that I should.
Sorry. So
It's a district.
I believe there was an investigation that was done in the time when I was not at council, so I wasn't involved in that. But yes, there was an investigation done following one of the flooding events, and some recommendations have been put forward, which include waterway upgrades, lining, fencing, so looking at capacity of the channel, and some culvert replacements.
So that'll be funded by township stormwater district-wide?
District-wide.
Okay. Clarity around the sewerage, you said target rated, is that just this if you're outside the Selwyn sewage scheme, it's target rated for your own scheme, or is it? That's what you're saying?
No, so there is just, in terms of level of service projects, if you have a council connection to the sewer, then that's part of that one district rate. So it's coming under that targeted district rate.
I was just feeling a bit sorry. I'm not sure why it's been included, but Tamutu, 22 houses for 8.8 million is 400,000 a house. The poor old Tamutu people down there, if they're paying $400, 400,000 each a connection, they're going to be struggling. And then you sort of say, well, why would we do it? Why wouldn't you just leave it like Hororata, where they all have in-ground septic tanks? Just seems an inordinate amount to put onto a small community.
Yeah, so at the moment that is being funded through the district wastewater rate, so they'll be joining on to that scheme and paying that. So that's a discussion that could be had.
It would pay for it. It'd take them forever to pay it off. It's a pretty big stipend on them. What was the other one? No, that's it. Thank you.
Shane.
Yeah, I was just looking at the renewals budget, and the spikes are ugly, and you've just done your best to smooth that curve, I guess, into that 27-28 period. Sorry, that's why. The page 138, Diligent, the growth at the Pines there, just understanding that aligns with the 30-year infrastructure plan, and is that Pines 120 the predicted population in the previous report we had on infrastructure? Do those two numbers align? So, don't know if it completely makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure your question, but the 10-year program aligns 100% with the infrastructure strategy. So the programs are continuous. And so what's in the 10 years in the long-term plan is the first 10 years of the infrastructure strategy.
Yep.
Yeah, and then all our growth predictions are based on the growth predictions for the district. And every asset manager uses those same growth predictions. So we've lined the budgets and capacity to meet the growth demands.
Thank you. That was my question. Thanks.
Right. Lydia.
Just on the surface waters tell me a bit more about Springfield diversion investigations, because this community's kind of screaming out for some information around what's happening, and yeah, I don't know about this. So
I think this one's sort of an ongoing discussion. I think at the moment the capital works are outside the 10-year period because there's discussions whether it's a Selwyn District Council project to fund or if it's an Environmental Canterbury larger catchment management type project to fund. That's why it's the other 10 years, but we have put money in the first 10 years to carry on with that investigation work. So we have reported to the Springfield community on some options, increasing channel widths throughout the township or putting the diversion just above that. So this is to take those investigations and put more detail and rigor around the costings and design. But it's not to do the work.
Yeah, okay. And what are the implications of not connecting the drinking water schemes? Is that a compliance issue?
So connecting the schemes is well, the main thing is it helps make the schemes more resilient. So if something happens at one of the intakes, you know, the cyanobacteria or some other reason, if we've got the ability to move water between the schemes, then yep, that makes it more resilient. But having that no unplanned interruptions greater than 8 hours, if you've only got one source and you've got no alternative and something happens, then that's a more difficult target to meet. So absolutely connecting the schemes does help us with our compliance.
Okay, thank you.
Shane.
Yeah, sorry, that was just my last question around that as well, the resilience around the drinking water quality. And what does centralised treatment concept 5.3, what does that mean? Is that location or is that...
Yes, that centralised treatment is quite a large project. They also mentioned the infrastructure strategy, the $400 million. And so that's finding a low nitrate source of water and building one large treatment plant there to service the majority of the township. So as we see nitrate levels increase, not to a level which is of health concern today, but may well be in the future, this is a scheme we're looking at developing up to provide high quality, low nitrate water to our communities.
Yeah, thank you.
I've just got the last question and it's going to be on Pines 120. And I don't see in any of this project, especially if we're looking at a strategy, where we're going to purchase some more land from and when are we going to do it, because land prices are going up. So just curious about what's it going forward, given that this is a land-based system.
So in terms of land in the 10-year program, there is no land to be purchased, so there's no land required. However, you will be pleased to know, you and Grant will be pleased to know that we have got land in the 30-year infrastructure through additional land, but in the first 10 years, we don't require land to be purchased.
Okay. Right, so no further questions on Five Waters. I guess the last one is the community facilities.
Hi, Deborah, if I could just ask a follow-up to that question, because the answer is good, but if we know that in 30 years we're going to need land, and it will be more expensive in 15 years than it is now,
yeah.
I mean, it will require some work to figure out how much, I mean, you might already know how much land and stuff's needed, but just from a council finances point of view, thinking about a future and buying farmland early, what thought's gone into the timing of that, and is it because of the total quantity required, or is it just a timing thing because it's not needed in the next 10, we're not going to look to purchase it?
Yeah, I mean, we I wouldn't say daily, but certainly weekly or monthly, we get phone calls from real estate agents saying, hey, what about this piece of land? And we do due diligence and look at those and say, will they be fit for purpose or not? So if the opportunity came, we would definitely bring that back to council for consideration. But it is based on capacity. We've got so many square metres of irrigated land we require at certain time steps, and we just don't reach that over the next 10 plus years.
Thanks, Sam, for that question. Now the last tab we have is tab 2, community facility key project. No?
Yeah, so we sort of played a few here. Sorry, Deborah, we have changed things around. We've got a secret special slide from Andrew Boyd about resource recovery and waste, which we've slipped
Which
in.
is
So
not on the agenda.
it's not, no. So this is we'd like to see as a add a bonus slide, and then after this we'll go straight back to. Yeah. Thank you, Andrew Boyd.
I'm just looking at the time. Do I have a mover and a seconder? And I consider this as a workshop, but given the length of time that we've actually been sitting here, do I need understanding orders, a time frame to extend the time of the meeting, or is this constituted as a totally separate meeting?
This is a separate meeting that starts at 2,
so. Okay, that's okay. Sorry.
Yes, you'll need to. This meeting started at 2 o'clock or just
Yes.
after, so you'll need to extend beyond 4 o'clock, or rush the meeting to finish in the next 7 minutes.
We will be extending
you need to move
extending
an
it.
extension.
So I will move that we will extend the time past 4 o'clock. Thanks for that advice. Do I have a seconder, please? Elizabeth, all in favour say aye. Those against? None. Carried. Right, resource recovery and waste.
Good afternoon. Okay, so for the resource recovery and waste activity, we've got a proposed capex of 11.61 million over the next 10-year period. There's one major project and several smaller ones. They're all funded predominantly by targeted rates. So the major project in this period is the proposed an enclosed refuse receiving area. For those of you who have been around for a few years will know that there's always been questions about the recovery park building, why it's so large and the shape it is, and whether it was fit for purpose. There's a number of issues with the existing structure, including the discovery of some rusty purlins along the roofing structure. The site is affected by all winds, but certainly predominantly the northeast wind. We get a number of some considerable issues with dust, debris and waste blowing back onto customers, and also the waste blowing around the site and requiring a lot of manual labour picking that waste up and trying to extract it from the site. The building itself is also currently coded as a importance level 2 under the building code, but we believe that that's really an incorrect classification and should have been designed and engineered to meet the IL3 standard as a minimum. The guidance for that reads, buildings for power generating facilities, water treatment for potable water, wastewater treatment facilities and other public utility facilities not included in importance level 4. And the reason I raise that is that I've been in the industry for 23 years now, and I've seen up and down the Motu all the different natural disasters that have played out and the criticality of the waste handling infrastructure when those events hit. So from a resilience and natural disasters perspective, it's really important to have a waste handling facility operating after those events. We also have no area on site currently to separate or divert waste from landfill. So staff have worked on an initial concept for a new structure that would enclose the refuse receiving area, cover the public refuse tipping area and the public organic waste tipping areas, provide more efficient transfer of organics to the shredding processing pad, block the predominant northeast wind from blowing waste, dust and debris at customers, improving the safety and customer experience, and would enable us to safely separate undercover recoverable and recyclable material from the waste stream, feeding both into the reuse shop in terms of reusable materials and into recyclable and divertible waste material markets. So that helps us to meet our waste diversion and CO2 reduction type targets. An area that's been signalled by the ministry as a key area of strategic focus. We would also intend to apply for ministry funding to assist with some of the cost of that build because it has a waste recovery function to it. So the funding in the first 2 years is to further develop our internal concept and develop detailed design for that, and then take it to council for approval to construct in year 1, year 2 of the next LTP period. So that's the covering off the key one. The other items I'll probably, just for time's sake, touch on the organics decontamination canopy. So we get an increasing level of contamination within the curbside organic stream. We conducted a trial last year now, where we brought in a trommel, which is a big rotating mesh drum with belts and hoppers. We had a really successful trial removing contaminants from the curbside organic material, and the flow and effects of that are huge in terms of reducing the wind-blown litter on site. You can imagine every single plastic bag or plastic item that gets through in the shredder becomes 100 pieces or 200 pieces, and that's hard to manage on site, and also causes a whole lot of issues around the compost quality that's produced at the other end. So the trial was extremely successful, and we have applied for funding through the Ministry for Environment for the purchase of a trommel, and the funding process requires us to match at least match 50% of the funding that we're asking for. So the second part of the decontamination process is to have a canopy to enclose that area or cover that area, so that we can attract and retain staff that will work on a less than salubrious job of removing rubbish from organic waste. And then we've got a few smaller items that I've detailed there. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, Shane.
Thank you, Angie. I guess it gives a direction on the shift from sort of transfer the current operations to more of a processing. Is that your intention for future growth, to prepare for resilience in our waste? And is it with consultation with those that are currently operating, like the organics side of things? And you did already mention that solution for organics, but yeah, those are my two questions.
Certainly in terms of capacity, this has been thought out to, at a concept stage at least, to consider that the growth that we expect over the coming years, but also the expectation that there'll be more and more demands on waste recovery and minimising waste to landfill. So having a structure that allows us to complete those things safely and undercover is where we're heading. So definitely more processing prior to dumping it in the hole.
You mentioned the structure that's obviously currently safe, and
yes, it is under the importance level 2 structure classification. Under the importance level 3, it would be at a lower percentage of the National Building Standard. Yep.
Elizabeth.
Normally, I'm not an advocate for too much compliance from the council, but if there's one area I would like to see the compliance team go out, would be to really target people putting things in the wrong bins, because it's just an absolute piece of laziness we see in the constituents, some of the constituents. And if you're finding plastic in your green waste bin, I mean, that's horrendous, because everybody's got a rubbish bin or rubbish bag option. It's just a shame that we're still dealing with that after all these years of having bins and recycling available. Is there any more opportunity for us to redirect things initially before people even come through the gates to you? Like, obviously in Christchurch, they've got the eco shop, and some of the op shops have drop-off centres and drop-off points. Do we have any other solutions to a drop-off point before people then come through to you guys in the facility? For obviously items that are perfectly acceptable to be on-sold or upcycled, or like building supplies, for example.
Yes, we do. So good question. So we have under the recycling canopy a section waiting to be unveiled. It's had a sign up for a while now to peel off to open up the reusables receivable area. And that area will be staffed with cord staff members to accept or reject items for that it might be suitable for the reuse shop. But there's always a proportion of the populace that aren't interested in doing that, and we still expect to receive quite a degree of material through the waste stream, and that will come at a considerable cost, an increasing cost as waste levies and landfill fees increase. So as some of the plans we've got with that contractor, we're looking to have diverter roles where we have we're looking to do trials where we have staff members available on site to spot before items are tipped and divert those themselves, sort of like oh, thank you, I'll grab that off you, and then putting it aside for the shop rather than it smashing on the floor in the pit. So yeah, we're hoping to tackle it from both sides. And then when it comes to the commercial and construction waste, pretty tricky to get them to divert prior unless they set up things on site. A lot of the residential building sites just don't have the space, and there are quite a lot of complexities around the different trades, the electricians and plumbers, etc., coming and going, and the residential construction space has always been tricky to handle at a source separation basis, but those that do can make use of the item, the availability of our cardboard, our plasterboard, our polystyrene, that sort of stuff. Yeah, thank you.
Sophie.
Kia ora, thank you very much for coming. Yeah, I think most of what I was going to say has already been covered, to be honest, but I think the organics decontamination is going to be even more relevant once we all start, or everyone in the urban areas starts becoming required to have a green bin. So yeah, is there any possibility of us seeing green bin audits like we used to see yellow bin audits in the future?
Yes, we're just in discussions with our contractor at the moment about reinstating both recycling and also introducing green bin audits. So we did stop those quite some time ago. It might have been June the year before. But we have had at least one load rejected recently, possibly two, I think, of recycling. So it's time to reinstate those inspections. And because of the volume of waste in the organic bins, we want to add that to the inspections. Yeah.
Sam.
Yeah, I thought you might have been coming with a proposal to make the drop off 3 or 4 stories, and you're going to talk about ramps. Ever since it was built, it seemed pretty ridiculous. So really good to see a plan to make it a bit more friendly for those that are using the site, particularly with the wind. Basically, trying to reject every piece of rubbish that you try and put in. It just blows it straight back in your trailer. So thanks.
Thank you. Tim had an enjoyable experience when he came down for his site tour and got a mouthful of dust.
And I'm going to ask the last question in this section. Just with regards to pressure of our rural pickup areas, especially where we've got large numbers of people that have to take their bins, say, 2 kilometres away down to a main road to get collected. And you sort of notice that on collection days in a lot of the rural areas that still want their rubbish collected. Are we looking at a review of our collection routes so we don't have something like 15 bins sitting alongside an intersection in a rural area? And it may be the same for urban areas as well as the growth actually happens. So I just wonder if we've got a strategy going forward for managing the growth in that area where there's pressure.
Yes, so we're actually in discussions with our contractor at the moment. We've been working with our GIS team to do a heat map of all properties that don't currently receive a curbside service. The the outcome of that is that it's a very slow manual process to work through each of the different areas. But so that's going to be kind of a medium term thing to work through with them. I don't think we'll ever get away from having drop-off points for those rural areas. Occasionally, you never travel down every single road because a lot of them aren't necessarily suitable for curbside vehicles. But what we are hoping to do is to extend a little further into some of those areas where there's half a dozen farmhouses on one site, for instance. And if we could do, say, a loop, we might bring those collection points with the 15 bins on the corner a bit closer to some people's houses. We should note that we do have a 96% access to curbside service currently, which is actually pretty good. WIMAC, for instance, of the documents we can find, has about 75% access to curbside service, and they have a smaller geographical area than what Selwyn does. And Ashburton, while is more similar in terms of the square kilometres of the district, has about 73% access. So at 96%, even though we do hear from some residents who are still off route, the issues associated with that, we're relatively wise compared to our peers doing very well. But that doesn't stop us from continuing to try and develop those.
I was just saying, conscious of time, we should probably keep the questions to capital delivery projects.
Right. Thanks very much for your. Oh, sorry, Bob.
Yeah, it's not on capital. It's just on you're saying about recycle bins and the audits. Seems to be problems in the smaller communities now with people dumping their rubbish in other people's bins. So it would make auditing of the people who are putting their bins out pretty awkward. So I don't know if there's any thoughts on that, but I'm getting quite a lot of complaints.
Yeah, anecdotally, we do hear of that from time to time. It is an offence under the bylaw, so if we can find any way to actually prove that, we would follow that up. But very tricky to follow up. Yeah. But we have to just exercise discretion around those situations. Yeah.
Look, thanks, Andrew and Murray, for the presentation. Now we have community facility key projects 10 years. No.
All right, so last but not least, welcome Mark and Annette. Oh, sorry, Mark.
Right, and I'm taking key note that this is the Infrastructure and Property Committee for the 24-34 LTP as of the 21st of February. So I'm just keeping that date in mind with regards to the projects. And I'll also make the comment that probably many of these projects could be subject to submission to the LTP process, but these are living documents, and I guess they can be adjusted at any time with regards to it. So I'm looking at them not being a fait accompli. And I guess the one question I've got with some of the costings that have actually slipped through into this document, I'm just wondering whether we have our budgets correct with regards to some of the later figures that have actually been given to us in this document. So I've highlighted them in my comments, but I just want to point it out. Maybe they're just a mistake and a number's been missed off.
Just in the interest of time, Deborah, maybe we take that offline. We've got all your questions
Yeah,
here. We can address those.
Yeah, they can be addressed offline. Yeah, fine.
Kia ora. Community facilities CapEx program. I thought to start with, I'd just recap on the services that are covered, which are a bit of a mixed bag of things that make up community facilities. So just to make sure everyone's completely aware of what's involved in that. I'll zip through these first few slides because they just provide a bit of context to the CapEx program, and then we'll just get into the actual programs themselves. So Just to start with, around the sort of key considerations. So these are the sort of headline items that you might pick out of the whole program. So it's pretty much a business as usual program, and plus growth, of course. So we've got quite a large growth component involved in that. The total CapEx program over the 10-year period is around 204 million. The renewals part of that, that's been increasing, and that's because of the condition and age profile of the assets. A lot of our assets have a much shorter economic life than some of the other assets. So things like playgrounds and those sorts of things, about 20, 25-year life maximum. So we've got a program of 44.7 million over that 10 years. The growth program, as I said, is a big part of it. We've got 88.6 million over the 10 years, and most of that's funded through development contributions. We have included in the program a lot of the planning work, but particularly the PARS Spaces and Places plan that was adopted last year, which had quite a big program of work in it. And we've also introduced some new stuff, although we have had some of these things in previously in terms of energy efficiency initiatives and those sort of things, but we have we've brought in some further carbon reduction initiatives and some climate change response stuff as well into both the OPEX side and the capital program. One element that we have looked at quite closely is our provision levels for sports parks. And we did have a sort of aspirational level, which was right at the top end of 3 hectares per 1,000 population. This is based on the sort of national standards. And we're looking to reduce that, and it's simply because it's not sustainable going forward. And we're still sort of around the sort of median area in terms of the guidelines at 2.5 hectares, or even between 2 and 2.5 hectares is in that sort of area. So, however, it still means that we've got around 48 hectares of sports park to be developed over that 10-year period to meet the lower standard. So, and we're actually in a deficit at the moment, particularly in the eastern part of the district in terms of our sport provision. I'll show you a little graph in a minute which explains that in a bit more detail. Just with the growth projected, township growth over the next 10 years, we're expecting around 25 hectares of additional space in terms of neighbourhood reserves and access ways and playgrounds and those sorts of things. We've got I would describe as quite a moderate program over these 10 years in terms of the major projects, particularly compared to the build program that we've had in the last 10 years. So, and you're aware of all those projects, and they've been well socialised with council in previous workshops. In terms of key drivers for the capital program, some of those I've covered: growth and demand, obviously, levels of service expectations, community preferences, the assumptions that we developed, climate change measures, renewal profile, key risks and criticality, which is about public safety and compliance, the vision of future Selwyn, although that hasn't really kicked in yet, but we're picking up on some of the threads around that, and some of the other strategies and plans, policies adopted by council. Just a quick recap on growth. So we've got over 23,000 people arriving in the district, supposedly over the next 10 years, mostly in the eastern part of the district. It's around 60 odd percent in those bigger towns in the eastern part of the district. We've also got a changing demographic profile in terms of age, which does have more of an impact on our services, particularly in terms of the growth of the younger population, not so much, and you'll see a big bulge in that sort of mid-years group, and then a growing ageing population as well that we're dealing with going forward. This was a graph I referred to before, and it just from our survey that we did of sports clubs, and around 50% of them are struggling for space. So they're either anticipating they're going to have no space, or they're already struggling for space for their particular activity. So we've got that big demand. We've already got latent demand. As I said, we've revised the sports provision levels, and we've trying to balance that provision of active recreation, because we've got more participants in there as well. So we're trying to balance the program a bit more. So we're not spending all our money in sports parks, but we're also spending money in some of the other spaces, natural areas and that for active recreation as well. And also more indoor space, and that's a key one. You can see, I've just put a little snapshot of some of the figures up there in terms of our forecasts. And you look at particularly basketball, that's the participant numbers at the moment, and you'll see we're going from about 1,700 to over 5,000 potentially in that, just in that 10-year period, and that's because of changing preferences in sport and recreation. Also changes in ethnicity in the population as well. So there's quite a few drivers there that are starting to impact on the demand for sports and recreation space. Just a quick slide. This was just about the priorities that came through the pre-engagement work. One of the big priorities was around retention of green space and more green space for people. So, and also just preserving access to facilities and amenities, community spaces, and the environment was a big part of that. Our climate change reduction program, which I mentioned briefly before. So in terms of climate change, we've done work on the impacts of climate change through a report from Aqualink, and this time around it picked up the potential risks in the open space areas and for community facilities. So we've now got a much better understanding around what those might be. We do have to do more work to actually understand what the implications are for our assets. So we know what the risks are, but what does that actually really mean for our assets? We're also doing quite a lot of work on our emissions reduction targets as well. So that's an ongoing program. As I mentioned, asset renewals. The biggies are sort of building fit outs, envelopes and heating and ventilation systems, playgrounds, sports surfaces, artificial surfaces, a big one, courts and reseals of car parks and roadways and those sort of things. And you see it's a fairly balanced renewal program, and that's based on our condition information. We've got pretty good condition information, and also assessed remaining useful life of our assets as part of that. And as the others have mentioned, there's quite a lot of other quite complex things that go into developing those renewal programs around the asset performance and those sort of things as well. Strategies and plans, I won't spend too much on that. You're aware of all of that work that's been done. And move on from that one, but they're just some of the ones we've done. So this is just the overall capital program over those over that 10-year period, or just over 200 million. A bit of a spike there in 27-28, which is around some of those big build projects, and that's the Melbourne Indoor Courts, Rolleston Community Centre repurposing work, and another one which I can't think of off the top of my head, which will come up later on anyway. Prebbleton. So yeah, just moving into the actual service areas and starting with the one where we're probably all going to end up eventually.
But not today.
Not today, no. And some of the programs in here are scaled to the sort of the level of overall expenditure within that particular service area. So this is more hundreds of thousands rather than millions of dollars. One of the things to note is the death projections, which go up quite sharply, and that obviously affects our burial numbers, and you can see them, the little graph there showing those going up over that 10-year period. and we have to respond to that in terms of what we provide in our cemeteries. So, and that's things like cemetery beams. Some of our roadways need to be expanded, and some entrance improvements and those sort of things, with high use of some of our cemeteries expected over that period. One of the things we are introducing in this is some toilet. We don't have toilets in any of our cemeteries at the moment. We've had feedback through, we do an annual survey of funeral directors, and one of the things they've said is toilets in some of our high-use cemeteries would be really useful, because a lot of older people there and no access to toilet facilities that might be there for a while. So that's one of the things we have introduced into this program going forward. Thanks. Public toilets. I think with our public toilet network, we've actually done so much work on it over the last few years that there's very little to do in terms of renewal work. So there's only a couple of renewals that have been identified over that 10-year period. You'll see the graph on the side there, which is our condition summary, and that's the trend that we've had over since 2007. We've been picking up the information, and it just shows that our toilet condition has just been increasing and increasing over that period, because we've been replacing a lot of the old ones and building new ones. And a lot of that was through that TIF funding program. We were able to get leverage funds through that. We've got a few new toilet facilities for growth. A lot of those are funded significantly from development contributions. We do a performance report on all of our toilets as well, and that little graph on the side there is one. That's the Leaston RSA, and we look at a whole lot of different aspects, and it gives us a profile of what the toilet's like and where the issues are. Yeah. So, but that feeds into our program and gives us some information on that. So, yeah, I'll move on from that one. So, recreation reserve. So, this is one of our bigger service areas in terms of expenditure. Bigger renewal program. As I mentioned before, we need to provide that 48 hectares of sports space going forward. So, we've got a program there in a number of parks. We've already got the land, so there's no land purchase involved. These are existing bits of land that we can develop. We've got 17 million allocated across those reserves. Some of it's sort of ongoing from the current LTP. We've also got, as part of that program, is the district park. So there's about 26 million to develop that, and that 35 hectares contributes to the 48. So that's part of that 48 hectares that's needed. Although I think we're doing about 30 hectares in the district park for sports parks, sport and recreation stuff to start with. The other ones there are just ongoing programs. We presented information earlier about the sports park lighting program and how that was prioritised. So I won't go into any more detail on that one. And recreation reserves, next one. Yeah. This one here, so that 4 million at the top there, that's actually for that, what was discussed earlier on in terms of natural recreation area land purchase, shortfall in larger tracts of land and natural landscape areas. And it was something that came through our PARS planning work that we did. And that's the sort of thing that was mentioned earlier, that we're sort of looking at with that type of expenditure and program there. Our artificial pitches, so big capital cost in terms of renewals of the surfaces on those towards the end, mostly towards the end of the 10-year program, but they've got around about a 10-year life, the actual surface itself, before they wear out. So we've got the two hockey surfaces, the softball surface and the football surface. Our conservation reserves, that's largely funded through the MFE grant, and it's an ongoing program that we're doing with biodiversity enhancement and particularly at Yars Lagoon. Nature-based recreation, this is a new initiative, and it's one of the ones about balancing the balancing the expenditure going forward in terms of providing for active recreation. And it's even some of the partnership ones we've done in the past, but a bit more in a random sort of way, for instance, with the Willows and the West Milton Horse Park and those sort of things where we went into partnership with other land providers to provide space for active recreation. Hororata Reserve, that's the master planning program. It's a revamp. It's a pretty tired reserve all round. And so there's a program over that 10-year period to upgrade that based on the master plan work that was done. The carbon reduction things that I talked about earlier, we can see some of the things we're looking at there potentially from a capital point of view, just to change some of the ways that we're we're dealing with some of those facilities. And then there's a program there of our pavilion work that we're doing on replacement of pavilions or upgrade work as well. Here, townships and streetscapes, renewals are quite high. Playgrounds are a biggie in that one, and the undersurfaces as well. The new reserve development program, so that's $7 million over the 10 years, and that's for new reserves that are vested from subdivision, about 25 hectares. The graph up the top there just shows you when we're likely to get that land. And the graph below just shows the renewal profile, and you see that going up, and that's mostly playgrounds because a lot of them were built in the last 10 years are going to need to be looked at, particularly towards the end of this 10-year program going forward. Rolleston Town Centre, well aware of that project. That's just an ongoing project. We have included some playground upgrading work. Again, this has come out of both the accessibility charter work and audit work that we've done, as well as the PARS plan in terms of doing some work to make our playgrounds more accessible, but also looking at them from a different perspective as well, so that they're not just these formulaic playgrounds that have been put in all over the place, and doing something a little bit different there. And similarly, the path installation work has also come out of our accessibility audits that we've done to make access into our parks and a lot better. So, yep. Oh yeah, this is just the program on the district park. I don't think there's anything more on that one. Rolleston Town Centre, it's just finishing off the program. It's actually dependent a bit on the buildings that are built in there. So with Rolleston Fields, so that timing could change. We're not exactly sure at the moment, but okay. Whātaro, you're well aware of that project, so I won't go over that again. And I'll let Annette talk about aquatic facilities.
Kia ora, good afternoon. Well done on hanging in there, guys. So in terms of aquatic facilities, there's not a large amount of capital expenditure in terms of anything, any new builds, as has previously been raised. But again, the funds over the 10-year period are for the facility renewals, particularly at SAC, because it's such a high utilisation. Things like changing rooms and entranceways and stuff need to be upgraded, and also just the standard plant in mechanical and electrical renewals. We do have a lead project for the energy efficiency program at SAC to see if there's alternative ways to reduce the energy use there. So next one, please. So in terms of community centres and halls, which also include the indoor courts, a number of these projects have previously been socialised. Again, there's about $5.5 million in asset renewals there, bearing in mind that refers to the actual facility themselves.
their fit out and the grounds that they sit on. So there's car park resurfacing, lights, fencing, all of that type of stuff is in there. What else? So the indoor court, whakarau. So please just remember for whakarau that that has to be split between community centres and halls and the library's budget. And again, we're just indicating there that there's over the 10-year, in the first 3 years of the LTP, we've allocated a large amount of funds to facility surveys to look at accessibility improvements, energy efficiency improvements, and overall building surveys to help improve our condition understanding. And so that what that will then turn into from 2027 onwards is quite a large program that allows us to implement any improvements in climate change adaptation. Next one. So in terms of how our property and buildings are divided out, so some of the key funds in there that we've retained the strategic land and property purchases budget for the 10-year period. That again is just to fund land and property acquisitions that align with council strategies that have already been approved. For Rolleston headquarters, I think this is in the LTP, letting the community know. So we've got a pod extension, some car park compound extension work, and the upgrading of this council chambers in the entrance. If you want to keep going there. Under the libraries and service centres, we do have our ongoing asset renewals, and just a reminder that obviously this now includes Te Aratia, which is our is our premier civic building and is of a higher level of service. And yeah, so the renewals program actually reflects that, as it will hit its 10-year renewal programming in the period. And the other part of whakarau is included in here. There's also some work we need to do at the Lincoln Library. And just a reminder that in the past, this portfolio also included the commercial property buildings, but these have now been removed from the community facilities and are covered under the commercial property portfolio. Next one. We have a very small rental housing portfolio, most of which are purchased for strategic reasons for the construction of things such as roundabouts or car parks and other type things. But we do have a few that we're kind of sort of, due to their land encumbrances, are required to look after. So there's just a small amount of money in there to look after that.
Yeah, gravel reserves, it's hardly worth talking about, but we do have I guess the main key thing here is that we're actually moving from extraction into rehabilitation with our pits. You know, we did have 220 across the district. We have potentially got rid of a few recently through the dock and revocation process, which was still continuing on going forward. But there is a cost in looking after them. We are moving a lot of them into lease agreements for cleanfill operators. So that's not costing council anything, and we're getting a small rental, and we're getting our old pits rehabilitated for nothing. So it's quite a good outcome overall. The main one there, I guess, was Cemetery Pit in terms of that, which has been an ongoing program for a long time, and we've solved some of the issues there with water contamination, and so that's a potential good site for active recreation again going forward. Yeah. Yeah, and just an overall slide on the climate change and carbon reduction stuff. Just what we're doing, as Nanette said, a lot of scoping in the first few years, and then project delivery from year 4 onward, when we really understand what we're doing. And same with the climate change program as well. Thank you. Question?
Right. Grant.
2 questions. The first one's about the gravel reserves and the rehabilitation programs, the leases to third-party operators. what confidence do you have that there's no illegal dumping going on in that clean fill operation that might come back to bite us in the future around materials that we don't know are being dumped there? Is there some sort of bond, or how are we managing that clean fill dumping operations to make sure that we're not seeing unauthorised, for instance, pesticide containers being buried or whatever it might be in the future that comes in all of a sudden we're digging it out and paying to rehab it?
Yeah, what we're, I guess what we're relying on there is the resource consents. They're required to get the resource consents. They're monitored by ECAN, but we also have another person that acts as a consultant, because we're required to have a B grade certified quarry operator, and they also do pit inspections as well and give us a monthly report. They go around the pits, have a look what's going on, and will give us information back if there's anything there that looks untoward. But we haven't had for quite some time now any issues with that. I guess the other thing that's happened is that we're also having to pay a levy to MFE now of about $10 a tonne, which is paid for by the lessees, not by council. And as part of that process, there's also some monitoring going on as well because of the clean fill regulations and the different grades of clean fill that are allowed into different pit types. So there's quite a lot more monitoring going on than what has previously with those.
Second last question is around the Green Park Hall. I wondered is that a provision rather than actually a budget? Because I thought the outcome of that was still in contention as to who might be picking up the tab for that.
Yeah, it's a worst case scenario provisional budget that we put in there just to signal that may be needed. Otherwise, until we go through that process, we won't really know. Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Well, that's not one of my questions down. Thanks, Grant. I want to rattle through them really quickly, and you can come back to them. So obviously page 103 talks about the investigating groundwater level increase on the cemetery operations and compliance. Wanted to know if those are something that can be easily remedied with the old swales and soak pits, or if you're looking at much more expensive options. The artificial turf, you're saying it's only 10 to 15 years lifespan. Where does it go then? Does it become landfill, or can it be repurposed? Are there environmentally friendly options? Because I think as a council, we need to set the bar high and make sure that we're actually addressing those things. The SAC energy efficiency, the alternative heating costs for the swimming pools. Just wanted to know what you're looking at for that option. The strategic land, 7.5 million over the 10 years. I was just checking that was over 10 years, not per year. And the Lincoln Library corrosion exterior repairs at 500K seems a lot given the building's not that old. Is that out of its warranty, and is there no comeback to the manufacturer on that product?
I'll start with the cemetery question first. So it's about one of the potential impacts from climate change is a raise in groundwater level in the Lower Plains area, and we have a number of cemeteries in that Lower Plains area. We have one or two which we already have some issues with groundwater. We're required to have separation from groundwater. So probably our first thing that we'll be doing is one of them we've already got a monitoring bore, so is looking at some monitoring boards just to see what's happening with the groundwater. Potentially over time, because we're talking quite a long period, we may have to look at abandoning some cemeteries. That's a potential going forward in those lower areas, and re-looking at other. But we really haven't got the information around that at the moment, but that's a potential outcome that might be some way down the track.
Yeah, I'll try and answer a couple of them. In terms of great question about the artificial turf, and that was, though particularly the hockey and football turf was projects that came out of the previous LTP, and I was part of the team that wrote the report to council. And so that was the first time we had a proper environmental assessment done as part of the report that came to council to approve. So the two things are that we acknowledged at the time that the turf surfaces do need to be renewed at 10 years, and that we would be working very closely with the suppliers to see in that period if there was a more environmentally friendly option when it actually came up for renewal. So the technology is changing all the time because it's been driven out of the turfs come from Europe, so they're very focused on finding, minimising microplastics and other forms of contamination. So even though the technology is not there yet, we fully intend that when we get to that 10-year period, that we will be trying to find the most, the best technology in relation to that. Unfortunately, in terms of, and still currently, but when we get to that 10-year period, the options for reuse or recycling in New Zealand is quite limited. So again, just purely for our size. And so again, we would have to, when we came to that renewal period, we might have to look at options like returning it to Europe for recycling. And then you have to look at like carbon miles and stuff like that. So in answer to your question, we would definitely, as part of that assessment, we would be looking at what options we have. So yes, that's fully considered and was fully raised at the time that those projects were assigned. In terms of SAC, James, in reality, we're not 100% sure what the options are for alternative heating there, or energy or other energy efficiency options are. So that's why we need to do the assessment between now and the next LTP, so that we can come back with a really robust business case for what a sustainable option is going forward. Do you want me to answer the Lincoln one? Yeah, so essentially Lincoln is a placeholder budget. There has been, when we had a legal person, don't go there. Okay, so I just have to tell you that it's a placeholder budget and there'll be further information to follow. Yeah. Worst case scenario.
Okay. Lydia.
Tell me about the unmanned campground for Glen Tunnel.
Probably another PE.
I guess that's news to me. And
so all I can say is that is a placeholder budget. But what I can, but currently council has, based on previous council decision, there is a lease in place that ends in 2026. Yes. And after such time, council's position is that it will move to being an unmanned campground.
Okay, and so that's a staff decision.
Oh, sorry.
I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
Apologies, I got that wrong.
Sorry, no, it's not a position. It's just an opportunity to look at that point, and there'll be a whole lot of work to be done before we get to that point. But it was just signalling that that's an option, a potential option going forward.
And that aligns with the climate change information as well, climate change adaptation as well. That it may not be able to be a campground forever due to the flooding profiles there.
Thank you.
Sophie.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm sure you can see the final straight ahead.
10 minutes to 5.
Kia ora, Sophie. Kia ora, Sophie. Bring it home.
It's gorgeous, babe.
LTP just around the corner.
It's awesome. But yeah, I love the regular mentions of climate change adaptation and everything in here, because that's great. Well, climate change isn't great, but you know what I mean. Working towards it and actually having it stated, because that's important to a lot of people in our community, I guess. And so my questions are, one was around Cemetery Pit. Interesting that on the same slide there's mention of groundwater levels increasing in the lower plains, and that sort of area is very much in the high groundwater sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm just sort of like, is it likely to end up having to be rehabilitated to ground level?
Yeah, we've actually got some monitoring boards there, and some councillors may be aware that we did look at extending that for gravel extraction a couple of years ago. and we found that just across the boundary, there's underground streams that run through there. One of them's seeping into the pit at the moment, and they've had problems with groundwater there. So it's a matter of raising the pit level, but we have to do that within our consent requirements. So in terms of what we put in there, we've got to be very careful about that. We do have some of the areas are going to be well above that level. We may, even the suggestion was made the other day, if we could get the clean water, if we get clean enough water, we could have a water body, potentially a water body in there, but there's a lot of work to be done to decide whether that would be feasible or not. But that is something to look at for the future in the old pit area, because we do have the forest and we do have the bit that's already been filled over time up to ground level. So it's quite a big site. It's about 27 hectares in total.
Yep. Next question is on property and buildings. There's a line that says district bike EV stations, but in the next section it says district-wide EV stations. So I'm just wondering, is it a misspelling, or are we talking like Locky Docks? So is that for bikes or for EV cars? Was more the question.
No, it was for bikes.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's cool. I just wanted to double check just because it was.
Yeah.
No,
it is the description next to it. It's not quite right.
Fair enough. Last question, I promise. On the artificial turfs. I vaguely remember the hockey club and football club not paying towards a fund for those replacement costs as part of their rental as well.
That's correct. So they do, as part of their rental, there is I guess you'd call it a sinking fund that is when we did all the calculations originally, which covers some of the contribution to the renewal cost. That's correct.
Right, Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is to Jenny. And does it take more endurance to run an ultra marathon or sit one of these all day? Congratulations, Jenny, by the way. Well done. My question that I get a fair bit from people is, why are there no toilets at some of the playgrounds? And they are developer playgrounds, so it might be a side point, but some of the playgrounds currently, there's lack of toilets in the development. Oh, you stepped out. So you've spoken about reduction of sports spaces needed. The question that was going around in my head, so does that mean potentially the total out of all the sports spaces needed, and the reduction of that total mean that potentially an underutilised asset may be divested or used for a different purpose? There's one, artificial turf, pool renewals. I guess the focus on SAC, which is a good thing, given the growth, and then the budget towards the existing other facilities, given that they will be fit for purpose but a depreciating asset, that plan is to move into your PARs around ward-based facilities in the future, around pool facilities, I'm thinking, and rental housing. If they're not rental houses, then they shouldn't really be under that that banner or that heading. If they're the figure up there related to rental housing, if they're not being used for that, I don't think it should be under that. If they're not. And lastly, cemetery pit. Oh, thanks very much for that. That's the best news I've heard all day, really. So the water issue that was there is now you're confident that's resolved, and if so, can the public use that park now? The part of it anyway that's not being used by the lessee. It's a good facility.
I'll start with cemetery pit.
Roger, mate. Thank you.
I've got 20 more. Yeah, so we did solve the issue that was there before with the water and the pond that was there originally, which had contaminated water with.
It's had investment into it.
Cyanobacteria. So that's been solved. We still can't open it to the public because we have to go through a consenting process in terms of change of use and those sorts of things that didn't happen earlier on, but it actually needed to happen. So we've got to go through that process. So we're actually talking about that the other day.
Oh, good.
So we've got some funding to start looking at that going forward.
All right.
With the rental houses, so I think we've got about 16 rental houses now, and it's a lot of them, I think, as Annette mentioned, houses that a lot of them are on reserve land, and they're difficult to get rid of. We've got one in Prebleton, for instance, which is next to Prebleton Nature Park. We've got them all over the place. All the ones that we've been able to dispose of that we haven't needed for any other purpose, they've been gone. But we've still got a few in Lincoln and a few other places which were bought for strategic purposes, which still may be used for that.
Yep.
And they're all kept within the rental housing group because, and it's partly to do with tax purposes for the way that they're financed. The other question was around
They're outside the 10-year period.
Yeah, so the other pools I think are in the infrastructure strategy. So that's a relook at Darfield, obviously, and also potentially when Southbridge gets to end of life, what we do in that area. So they've been considered as part of the infrastructure strategy. Yeah.
Okay. Look, I'm just conscious of the time and the length of time that everybody's been here. If you've got any further questions of staff, can I suggest that you send them through to Tim, who will disseminate them to the appropriate staff members, and you will get a response back with regards to those questions, because it's been a long paper to understand. I appreciate the time that the staff have actually put into this to actually write it, and the time that councillors have actually taken to read it and ask questions for clarification, so we all fully understand these particular documents that are assigned to our funding streams for our LT plan planning process. So with 1 minute to 5, I am going to close this meeting and thank everybody for their participation. Thank you.